Morning, Brian. Welcome to Firm Forward. We are excited to have you. We're going to be talking about legal marketing and strategies and things firms can look for and be aware of and get excited about in marketing. Really, so we're excited to have you. Brian is the founder and principal of 6S Digital. So, first question out of the gate, the big one, the introduction. How did you get into and started working with law firms and legal marketing overall?
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it and happy to be here. The way that I got started was, and let me kind of go back before I actually got started in legal marketing. I actually have a background going all the way back to one of my bachelor's degrees was in graphic design, and then I got into sales. And then while I was in sales, I also started, I actually had a whiskey company that I was working on and was trying to decide, like, hey, do I really want to have a go at this? And I was looking at making a big move. But then I also, due to my outstanding performance working for another company, Cintas, where I was top 5% there, I was given an opportunity to go and work for Thomson Reuters, Super Lawyers and Fine Law, and I weighed that versus doing the whiskey thing, which seems really wild. Like, do I want to go dress in a suit all day and go talk to lawyers, or do I want to run around making whiskey all night? So, and
I think part of that's also a choice between entrepreneurship and working in the corporate America too.
Yeah. So, but I said, hey, I can always do this or that, and I decided I wanted to give it a run and work with lawyers, law firms, and so that's how I got started. And so I did a really good stint working for Thomson Reuters.
Okay, and when you're at Thomson Reuters, kind of give us a little bit of the idea of the time and scale there.
Yeah, so I was there for over 5 years. I did President's Club my first full year, and really good. Had a really good time, and just like most people would say about most of their past working experiences, it was all about the people that they met, and relationships they formed, and that's very true for me as well.
All right, well, let's jump into it. So, the legal space is an interesting one when it comes to marketing. There's so many different practice areas. So you say legal, right? And most people that don't understand how big of a scope that really is and how different it is from one practice area to the next, one different size law firm versus another size law firm. And there's so many different aspects that come into play when we think of this. And so when you go kind of think of it as a broad spectrum, what do you think the biggest misconception overall, or if you'd like to narrow it down, you can, but what do you think the biggest misconception is about marketing for lawyers?
So I think that this is changing with younger generations of attorneys becoming managing partners of firms, but there's still at least probably half of the law firms out there that have a bit more old school mentality of we don't need to market if we're really good. We get everything by word of mouth, and only second-rate players market. And this goes all the way back to 1978 when lawyers were not even up until that point allowed to advertise their services. And so legal's always been pretty behind the curve in terms of advertising and marketing. And if you want to know what legal marketing is going to look like 20 years from now, you can look at what we're doing today in some other fields. And so we'll call them late adopters as an industry. Not that there's not some forward-thinking people running law firms, but that's to trace back to the original question. I think that there's still a ton of law firms out there that only want to rely on word-of-mouth referrals, and for some of them, that's the correct move. But you can imagine people that are thinking like, hey, we're a great law firm, we're doing personal injury, and it's not worth us to invest in marketing. It's not a good idea.
Yeah, I think, to kind of add on to that, one of the things that I would say is a lot of the attorneys that we've come across and worked with, they have that respect within the word of mouth, but the person giving the referral to the other person, that kind of game of telephone, when it gets to the actual person who wants to be your client, they are still going online to check you out. And they are still going online to validate that recommendation more than there's ever been in the past. In the past, you would get that recommendation, you would pick up the phone, you'd call them, and you would be in touch immediately with somebody who represented the person that was referred to you. Now, that is not the first step. The first step is to look you up online and look at what your digital presence is like, look at what your reviews are like, and see how you are represented via Google and other places. And depending on the practice area, you might go look at LinkedIn or social media and other places too, to get a feel if this is a person, even with a strong recommendation or strong referral, is this a firm and or group of people who I want to go and have them represent me for whatever the need is. And I think the last little part there, the firm and or group of people, is more important than ever these days. That with the internet and with the vast amounts of information that's available, people are learning more about the attorney than ever before. So they're personified a lot more than they ever were in the past. And it's because you can see them online, you can hear about their reviews and all these different things, and they're more of a service that you can access and see more freely than ever before. So I think it's super important, the digital presence, no matter how strong your referral network is. I think the digital presence is the way to cement that network and the trust within that network.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. One thing, one statistic I share with firms that I've never had anyone disagree with this stat. They all feel it in their core, and having done business for so long. But it's around an 80%, it's like 79, 78, 79% of potential really good case leads. If it's a valid case lead and they speak to the attorney, about an 80% likelihood that they sign with that attorney on a first call. Right? So what we've seen in trends and over several years is that the battle for getting the most quality and quantity of leads is, how do I get them to call me first? Right?
Yeah.
Because every attorney, when I tell them that stat, they're like, yes, I close at 80%. Right? I'm awesome. And I don't speak to anybody that doesn't want to hire me if it's a valid case lead, right? So, that's one of the most common things that we see. But if we know that to be true, then you should then know that the most important thing to do is to make sure that if someone is a valid case lead, that they call you first.
Yeah.
Because everybody else is saying the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, the close rate goes both ways. In other words, if they call your competitor first, 80% chance they go with them. And the digital presence is going to be the key to that. So that's a great point, good stat. Which leads me to my next question. So the next one is, when you do get on the line, when you are finally able to connect with an attorney, and we're talking about marketing, it could be a new firm just opening up. It could be a firm that's, maybe been around a little while and realizing the need to get into marketing. And when you're on that first call with a firm, what sort of discovery process do you have to help them understand what they need, and how do you use that to help the attorney understand it rather than have it be a pitch, right? Like, because what we have found and what I've experienced in the last couple of years is that there's a toolbox of services that most agencies have access to. There's only so many of them. And the differentiator is learning how to apply them to the right firm at the right time in the right instances. And most of the attorneys are unaware of what that looks like. And so helping them find out what that looks like is what I think differentiates a successful agency from one that struggles. And so in your process, what does that look like? How do you help a firm understand the right services?
So for me, over the years, this can be broken up and can be a complicated answer if you wanted it to be, but I've continually found that it's the easiest way to compartmentalize things in the most deciding factors. Number one being time scale. How fast do they need to see a return on their investment? And that will dictate, budget over time. So if someone needs to see, I need a case signed, in the next month to 3 months, that's going to be a very different strategy that you would offer to that person versus someone that's an already established firm. They have a very much need to be an authority on a certain specific type of case, and that's what they want to put forward. And they may not have, either they don't have the capacity or they are not tolerant to answering several phone calls that don't work out. Because, the thing that I would love for every firm to understand is yes, your word of mouth referrals are always going to be your highest quality of conversion for a case lead, but that doesn't mean you don't amplify your brand. You don't do everything that's next best in terms of getting a high quality case lead to come your way. And because a lot of those things compound upon each other, right? So having a great brand out there and a lot of good authoritative articles and PR and all that will also fall back on your referrals, because if someone was giving you were given a word of mouth referral, that's going to increase the conversion of those as well. Do you follow?
Yeah, and I think to go back to what you first started with is really the driving point, is the pace at which you need to grow is question number one. Because if you need it now, that's paid. That's a paid strategy. And there are tools in the toolbox that apply to that paid strategy. If you have a good client base and you're looking to expand, and one of the favorite words for everybody is to become an authority on topics and types of cases, etc., there's a plan for that as well. The two plans can, and in my opinion, should coexist. What I love about the strategy of this is that you can take a single attorney firm and you can help them manipulate their funnel in order to ensure that if they have a big case, that they're not focused on this big case while the funnel runs dry because they're a single attorney and they can't solve for these other needs while the phone is ringing. And while those things are happening, there are strategies like recurring content and such to keep them relevant while they're working on these other things. And so I would say that first part that you covered is really important, and I don't think there's enough conversation around how those things are applied and why they're important. I think there's a lot of, I'm just paying for ads, right? And just, and then you're not really thinking that that's immediate funnel versus the recurring content and the SEO and the things that people aren't always excited about. That's going to keep you relevant for longer. And those are exciting conversations. And so I think, that part really resonates with me.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, just a quick add to that. There's not a lot of clients that I've worked with because it just doesn't work out. But there are some clients, usually it's a PI firm, possibly employment, so on, but they will do just direct ad buys. And because they only do direct ad buys, they get locked in this world where there's definitely a ceiling driven by market competition that will continually just suppress what your ROI will be on case leads. And because they're not willing to invest in recurring content and SEO and some of the things that will eventually help them get the best case leads at a higher conversion rate, the lowest cost per lead, all these great things into how you build out a really effective long-term marketing strategy, they can never get there because they only want to hire their next marketing agency or the next employee that's going to do a better conversion or cost per lead on direct ad buys, and they get locked there and they're never willing to spend the money because it is an investment and it does lower their return initially.
I think that's a perfect segue into the next segment of what I want to talk about is I think a lot of the reason for the behavior that you just described is because there is a lot of bad actors in the agency space. There are people who are selling things that they are cookie cutter, pulled out of one box and just continually applied to firms without much understanding of the firm, without really diving in and understanding dynamics within the firm. And what's interesting to me is I come from more of a business development background in other industries outside of legal, and taking those learnings and applying them to legal has been really interesting to me. And when you think of it that way, it's understandable why a lot of attorneys feel burned by marketing agencies and they feel standoffish. And it's understandable why when you say, hey, I promise if you give me this money today, your cost per lead and everything later will be good, because they've been pitched that. But sure, the problem is when you're pitched that from somebody, they're given most of these agencies are giving out services for immediate impact because they think that's how they're going to continue to be a part of this firm's development. But when a firm really understands long-term investment, like you mentioned, I think that's how we really change the game for people, is really understanding that it's an ecosystem. It's not one thing or the other thing. And if you can take the time, even if in the beginning it's a smaller investment and you grow into it, whatever it may be, but this evergreen, I don't love that word, but this evergreen content development, things that continue to pay off, right? That's not always easy in the attorney's mindset. For somebody who an industry is always billed by the hour, things seem to always fall into that mindset. So when you get on the phone and you're talking to partners at firms, what do you help them understand about why they can trust you even though they've been burned in the past? What are the things that we can do to help partners and firms understand that this is an important piece, and there are good marketing agencies out there that have their best interest in mind?
That's a great question. Maybe the toughest question. So a lot of the current clients are coming to us by way of referral. And the other way which would relay into what would I advise our clients to do to gain trust, similar to me answering the question for myself and for our company, is doing things like this, right? Getting more content out that explains what the differentiators are, to help slice through that sea of sameness, so to speak. That's a big differentiator. So there are, to your point, there's a ton of, even as a marketing company, I get just a crazy amount of emails in my inbox about SEO or digital marketing, improving our website, etc. And these are all bots, right? That are sending these emails, and so yeah, there's got to be a way for you to understand, like, having someone else that's trusted in the legal community is a big deal, because just being a digital marketer will not cut it, and you have a very, very high likely chance of being disappointed in hiring a marketing company that's not dedicated to your industry and doesn't know what your practice area needs are. That's to hire a marketing company, let's just say for a personal injury firm or an employment that's working on contingencies or working bigger, tougher cases, and if you take them away to do consultations or calls, paid or not, to do calls with people that are not great quality of calls, that hurts them in so many compounding ways. So you really need to figure out the front end of the office for intake and how to maximize that filter before we really dedicate the attorney's time to spending time on the call.
I'll add a little bit to that, and I just have a couple more questions for you. But I'll add a little bit to that too. Is if you're on a call with someone and they're not talking to you about some form of having some skin in the game, are they asking you about ROI? Are they, you just hit something a moment ago about intake. if you're talking to an agency and they are not asking you, how are you going to do this? What's your intake procedure? What CRMs are you using? Then they're not really that concerned about you closing the deal. Because everybody worth anything in this industry should make sure that you have the ability and the understanding to receive the lead and close the lead and track the lead. Because if you don't, that's an automatic sign that they're not really concerned about that. If they don't ask about it, it's an automatic sign they're not concerned about it. One of my favorite questions in our methodology is, what are you going to do when the phone starts ringing? Who's going to answer the call? And so we've built partnerships through our methodology with Smith AI, with CallRail, with all these things, so that we can actually go and look at the data and help them close the lead. Because we all know, no matter how many leads I push into the firm, if you're not winning cases, not closing cases, it doesn't matter. And so yeah, if you're not closing the lead, if they're not becoming a client, then it doesn't matter. And so to me, that's one big differentiator that I've seen throughout my time in this particular space, is people don't ask that question enough. And if you don't want to be involved in that, it means you don't really care about my ROI. And if you're not, and then to extend on that thought, one of the most interesting things to me is whether you're working with a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, these people have spent a tremendous amount of time in their education for their specific work, right? And usually that means they didn't take a bunch of classes in business development and business administration and all these different things. And so they are left quite frequently to trust in people to do something they aren't that familiar with. And that's a hard position to be in. And I think it puts the onus, in my opinion, on the agencies to rise up and prove out the trustworthiness by being concerned about the overall development of the business. Mm-hmm. And so one of those things is talking about ROI. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with a firm, because it proves that we're doing our job. It's the fastest, easiest way to prove we're doing our job. You give me $10 to market for you. If I give you back 2x of that, we're happy about that. And so throughout your time in legal marketing, have you seen an evolution from just selling services to getting a little bit more involved with quote unquote business development of firms in terms of understanding their ROI, their intake, et cetera?
Yeah, it's funny. To answer that question, there still seems to be like a dichotomy of those things, of that perspective, because there are, fractional COOs on one side, and then there's your marketing services on the other side. A lot of times they're not well integrated. To speak with someone about properly managing, and you're right to your first point, and most lawyers will freely admit this, they don't like to business manage, and they're not good. I mean, who can blame them? They, to get into law school, most paths there are, I go to school again, and I go to school, I take up a bar, and then I work for a large law firm in a lot of cases, most cases, and so they never get operational, like, business management experience, regardless if they took a class in business management. That's not the equal. So you're absolutely right. Understanding and deciding how to work with vendors, or even internal marketing or CMO of your firm, how to manage that process in a way where you have a great big understanding of the full funnel from marketing through closing the sale, and how people don't understand, and I don't mean this just for lawyers or managing partner. Most people do not understand how critical and what their deficiencies are in intake management. They just don't. Just like if you were managing a retail space and you didn't understand how critical it is to answer on the second ring, not the fourth or fifth, right? or that 85% of people will not leave you a voicemail if they don't get anybody on the phone. I mean, there's just so many, different, details to pay critical attention to where you turn your conversion rate from a 3% to a 6%. You're doubling your revenue.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things like that. And so I think, to your point, Dennis, taking a very consultative approach from a great business mindset, and how do we look at the full funnel and conversion rate and ROI, I guarantee you that most marketing agencies are not doing that for their law firms. I don't know. Other than Success Digital and maybe a couple others, I don't know a whole lot that do. Most of them, you're speaking with a sales rep that they're just trying to hit their sales goal in selling you any select product that they have in their product bag. And so it's not like they have like some sort of fiduciary duty for your success. And so
Right.
you're really trying to have to fill in a gap there that most law firms are not going to be great at initially.
Yeah, I think, I do have another question for you, but just to kind of like really button that one up, I think it's a really special thing to when I talk to people and you talk to people and you say the words boutique agency.
Yeah.
To me, what you just described is the definition of what you receive because we are a boutique agency. So if you were to put into words, in my opinion, what does that mean? Why do you say that? Well, we say that because we want you to know that when you get on with somebody that has anything to do with us, you're getting on with somebody who is truly invested in the success of our agency. What that means then is they are then obviously truly invested in the success of your firm, because you can't have one without the other. And so it's a really interesting dynamic, and hearing you put it into words like that is important, because I think that might be a huge takeaway from today's conversation, is that the boutique agency and its representatives are in the market looking for firms that we can work with, not just sell to, and firms that will be receptive to the consultative portion of what we offer. And I think when you build that kind of relationship, it's lasting. The retention is higher. The long-term strategy is better. The outcomes over years improve. And that's a special part of this conversation that I'm glad that we got to. I do have one more big question for you. And that question is, if you could give one piece of advice to managing partners out there, new attorneys, small firms, what is that one piece of advice that they should look for in working with a marketing team? They're gonna get a lot of calls, right? I just started my firm, or our firm is starting to do really well. Whatever it is, they're gonna get hammered with calls. You know it. We get hammered with them. My other businesses get hammered with them, and it's like, holy crap, what does any of this mean? I 9 times out of 10 am erasing these things and not even paying attention to them. What is the differentiator? What is the thing they should look for?
Boy, that is a tough question. Only one thing, huh? There's so many different scenarios that a new law firm. You asked before, a new law firm, is that correct?
Just and managing partners in general. And when I say that, as managing partners, some people think, oh my gosh, it must be a big firm if there's a managing partner. Well, if you're a solo attorney, you are the managing partner. So there's that whole gamut.
Yeah, there's a part of it goes back to your point earlier in the conversation about ROI, knowing what to expect and how to get there in the best way, right? And to know how to evaluate ROI in a productive manner, right? So here's one of the most common things I'll see with not the best management of ROI or paying attention to it is if I need a case lead like now to work on, if I have to take 10 calls or 20 calls. And if we're talking personal injury or employment, we're talking about a 3 to 5% conversion rate. So that's a lot of intake just to get a case lead. I don't scream at my marketing company for the other 50 calls that I took and think that the whole thing is trash. You have to understand the wheat chaff scenario. When you don't have enough word of mouth referrals coming in, right, which is the lowest cost per lead you could ever have, right, and you realize you've got to do some work and build up, but you also have a very direct, immediate need of getting some case leads signed, then you've got to understand what gets what. If we're doing just paid ads, because that's what you're going to have to do if you need to open up a case right away. You're going to spend a lot of money on, and you're going to have a lower ROI, and you're going to have to do more work in terms of more intake calls. You have to understand how that strategy impacts you, but know how and when to start transitioning to investing money and doing things with a more longer term play, with more thought leadership pieces, with more, PR that's going to be helpful for you in the long run. Evergreen content, like you had mentioned before.
I'll add one bit to that is, for me, it's going out there initially, like we keep saying, a lot of attorneys are looking to learn, and most salespeople are looking to sell. And if you come across the sales team who is willing to help you learn, I think that's what you should be looking for. I think when you get on the line with a salesperson and they realize that you're exploring and more explorative of what's really out there for me, what should I do, and that salesperson is able to step back for a moment and then start to talk to you about that and not drive services down your throat, that's one very important piece I think they should look for. And the other piece I think is really critical is the marketing world is full of guarantees these days. Everybody's offering a guarantee on this and a guarantee on that. And in my opinion, just like I mentioned earlier about having skin in the game, anybody who tells you, especially in the legal space, that they're going to give you an unconditional guarantee on anything is not trustworthy. If you're going to guarantee something, both players need some skin in the game. And one of the key things that we talked about earlier is that intake. If somebody says I'm going to guarantee you something but doesn't ask how you're going to receive the leads they give you and to ensure that they're being taken care of properly, then their guarantee is probably one they're only just using to close the deal. And while most of them are likely, in full transparency, out there to help close the deal, there are some of them that are still really valid. But they're the only ones that are really valid are the ones that ask questions that lead to you, the attorney, having some skin in the game in that process. And so to me, that's super important, man. This has been a great conversation. We're going to have a lot more of them. We have a lot more people that we're going to be putting on Firm Forward. It's a brand new opportunity here. Lots of content for firms, for attorneys to be able to repurpose and use with their agency. And whomever's handling their marketing, lots of opportunity for us to share this and help other firms grow and learn. Very excited about it, and thank you for your time today.
Yeah, it's great to do it. Appreciate you, bud.